All right, chapter 1, core concepts. They kind of started exploring how Photoshop works. We're basically going to make a primitive meme. There's more things we could do to it to make it a little bit of a stronger design, but for learning Photoshop, this will work really well. So like in this chapter, we want to introduce what the double layers are, what are selections, how do we move stuff around, and how do we add text to our image. While we're doing that, we're going to explore the interface of Photoshop, and we're going to look at how we can open, save, and close our files in the program. So to do this again, we'll just make this kind of goofy little meme. So let's hop over to Photoshop. And when you first open up Photoshop, there'll be a little splash screen as it loads, and then you will see this. So this is our, this is our home screen. So our home screen will have anything that we recently opened. So that would be down here if I had anything open since resetting my workspace. I can also flip back to my workspace by clicking PS or home. Over here on the right, I've got my help search, which Photoshop has pretty good help, so like don't be afraid to use that. We also have the present icon, which I kind of adore, which is a way of bringing this window back up. So when you first open up Photoshop or it's recently updated, you'll have a little splash screen right here telling you what's changed. And usually when you're opening up Photoshop, you don't have time to look at this, so they've added this little present icon to bring it back up and showing you what's recently been added. And like the reflection removal tool is kind of terrifying. Like it's pretty good. So the stuff, they're adding real stuff and they're adding it super fast. So like even versus like August of last year when I wrote the textbook, just even in this really basic chapter, there's a step that has gotten easier or faster or better since I wrote it a year ago. And we'll take a look at that here in a minute. So search, present icon. We also have generative credits. So when you're using generative credits, it tells you how many you have left. Depending on your subscription, you'll have unlimited with like limitations on what you can use. Like you can't use it to generate video or whatever. Otherwise, you'll just have like a set number of credits that you can use. And then it tells you how quickly they are going to be resetting. And then you have access to your account settings. You can click here to launch the Adobe page to modify any settings within your account if need be. In the center of your screen, you're going to have the basic home, or you can have the basic learn. So home, again, will have anything you've recently opened, and then these kind of new features. If you are just starting the program, I would not be afraid to just switch to learn, and you can see all these tutorials they've got here. Adobe recognizes that their software is weird, difficult, and hard to learn how to use. So they have really good help, and they have pretty good tutorials. We also have new file open. That's pretty self-explanatory. We have our Firefly workspace. I prefer to launch the Firefly web page rather than to use this workspace, but this is their image generator. And then generation image history will show you anything you've recently generated. Down here, we have files. So like if you're doing this as part of a class, you probably don't care about this. If you're an individual designer or photographer or painter or whatever, you also probably don't care about these because this is how you access your Creative Cloud storage. And like their cloud storage just isn't worth using for most people, if I'm honest. But if you're part of like a graphic design team or a photography team or something like that, it is really handy and good. It's like individuals, it's a waste of your money. For teams and companies and stuff, it's pretty darn good. Like it allows you to interface and work together on certain stuff in ways that would be difficult otherwise. Like it's good. Now to get started, we need to open up our first image. So what you're going to find out in Photoshop is that there's 9 million ways to do the same thing. So like we could come up to File, Open. We could go to New File. We go to Open. We could click and drag it over the icon down here in the bar. I could hit Command O and navigate to it. I could right click on the file and say Open in Photoshop. There's a bunch of ways of doing the same thing. For the most part, when I'm demonstrating, I am going to try to demonstrate the laziest option. A good Photoshopper is fast and lazy. And so that is our goal, is how can you be fast and lazy? And usually that's learning the hotkeys. So I'm going to hit Command O to go to Open. We can see that when I open it, I get the Creative Cloud crap. I don't care about this in the slightest because I'm doing this as an individual. So I'm going to click on my computer and hopefully that window will just never open up again. I'm then going to navigate to where I have my working files downloaded. And we can see that I have access to my Chapter 1 files right here. If you are using these files, if you've downloaded these files and you haven't expanded them yet from your zip file, you'll need to do that now. So I'm going to click cancel. And then depending on if you're in Windows or Apple, you'll go to Finder or Windows Explorer. This step will be pretty similar between the two. You'll navigate to wherever you have the file saved. This will probably be in your downloads or desktop. And we can see I have this zip file right here where it says chapters 1 through 5 zip. And in order to expand this on a Windows computer, there'll be a button up here labeled extract all or something. You'll click that, or you might just be able to double click on it. It's been a while since I've done this on a Windows computer. On Apple, I just simply double click on the on the zip thing, and it turns it into a folder that I can then interact with. Now, I don't need a second version of this, so we can see that I've got chapters 1 through 5 and then the 2, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And then you don't need to keep these zip files either. You can delete them after expanding it out into the folder. Speaking of which, since I am now here in my folder, I go to chapter 1 concepts and go to my yawning dude, and I could simply just drag it over Photoshop to open it. And that is exactly the same as going to File, Open, and going to where my files are at. Boop, 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 boop. And we'll take a closer look at different ways that stuff can be brought into Photoshop in Chapter 2, but for us right now, it's all kind of the same. So when we open it, we get to our workspace. So again, we have our home screen and we have our workspace, and I click the home to get out of there, and I click PS, boop, 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 so I can flip between them really quickly and easily. Once I'm here across the top, I have on Apple access to my preferences. Then I have my file, edit, and so on, these kind of menus that you should be used to from any type of program that you use on a Windows or Apple computer or Linuxy. Across the top, I'm going to have what's going to be called my tool option bar. My tool option bar will change based on what I have active over here on the left, which is my toolbar. So toolbar, tool option bar. The far end of my tool option bar, this area has changed a little bit from my home screen. I now have an export, a way to get stuff out of here and share. We're not going to use this. It's handy for if you're on a team. We have notifications, again, handy for if you're on a team. Help search, and then also learning and skills, something we're not going to use, but we do have this button right here that we care a lot about. So it might be defaulting to core tools for you, so your screen would look like so. Come up here and click on the workspace button and choose essentials. Now, since Adobe does know that their stuff is really hard to use, they've tried to do like a core version of all their programs, and the core versions of their programs kind of suck. And no one's tutorials really matches the core tools. They'll always switch to essentials or a different workspace. So I don't really know why they have it, but it's bad. But so go to essentials. That's what we want. Then we have that generative credit thing again, and then accessing our Adobe accounts. Underneath that, we have our panels. And so these are ways of doing different kind of controls for our tools, different ways of interacting with what's on our screen, ways of changing the appearance of our image. We'll use these panels a lot as we progress through this textbook. Some more terminology. This dark gray area around our image, this is going to be our workspace. I can't interact with it. So when you're using tools, if you want it to go to image edge, you will want to drag past the edge. So let's say I was using a brush tool to like draw on here, and I wanted it to be edged. I would not try to do this. I would just draw past the edge to get it to that hard edge. Then the image itself is going to be called our canvas. So you can think of it as like the painter's canvas. So we have my table and then my canvas on which my table sits. Underneath it, we have my contextual taskbar, and my contextual taskbar is exactly what it sounds like, tasks that are context sensitive. So Photoshop has gotten pretty good at figuring out what I want to do next, and it sticks it as a button right there, which is cool. Now, sometimes it's in your way, so you can click on those little lines to move it around. Sometimes you want it to go away, so you click the dots and you hide it, and then it's like, oh goodness, where did it go? You'll simply come up to Window and bring back the contextual taskbar like so. I can also click on these dots to reset its position to move it back to that kind of default movement. Also at the bottom, I have my current zoom level and my document size settings. Now, some things that can commonly go wrong when you're first interacting with Photoshop is this. I gotta close that area. And all of my stuff disappears. You've just simply hit the tab key. So hit the tab key to bring your tools back. Other things that could happen is, let's say you are having panels everywhere and oh goodness, this is dragged out. Like what's happened here? To fix some of this, I can come up to the top right and I can do reset essentials, and that will reset my panels. And if I've accidentally dragged this guy out, I just need to drag it and mouse over the top, and we can see that it plops back into place. So let's say I even had like multiple stuff open. Let's open the done file. Come on, Photoshop, you can do it. We can see now that there's these two little tabs right here representing those, and I can click and get it floating. So that's all that is representing. I can also close these by clicking the tiny little X to make it go away. Something else that can happen relatively frequently is you'll drag off to the side, or it'll be zoomed out and you can't find your image and it's gone or whatever, or it's hiding and you're just not noticing it anymore. If you hit Command or Control 0 on your keyboard, it will fit it. When I'm talking about Windows and Apple hotkeys, by the way, Control and Command are the same, and then Alt and Option are the same. So Command and Alt Windows, Control and Alt Windows, Command and Option Apple. Otherwise, the hotkeys are going to be agnostic. It's the same between the different operating systems. So go ahead and hit Command 0 to fit that on your screen. You can see that zoomed in a little bit. So here's where it was. Command 0, nice big front and center on my display. Finally, if you have to, let's say like the program is just borked and like you don't have a good way to like ask ChatGPT how to fix it, or you're not sitting next to your professor or something. It's like, how do I fix this? There is the nuclear option, which is to delete any program changes you've made to Photoshop. To do that, you will quit the program. And on Windows, you hold down Alt, Control, and Shift and double click on the icon to launch it. It'll ask you if you want to delete your preferences. Yes. If you're on Apple, same steps, quit the program, but it's Option, Command, Shift, delete preferences, and you're good to go. Again, that is the nuclear option because that should remove any sort of kind of preference changes you've made to the programs. Like I did that right before launching this, so like all of my workspaces and other stuff are gone. Great. Okay, so next what we want to do is we want to remove the background on here. And to do that, we're going to make something called a selection. So I'm going to come up to my toolbar and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 down. And I've got my Smart Selection tools. And I want a special one in here. I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to grab the Quick Select tool. Now, I knew that there was more than one tool there because it had a little caret mark in the bottom right. So notice how most of these have little marks, but like the Frame tool doesn't, and then this Targeted Adjustment tool doesn't. That allows you to know that which ones are in there. Also notice that when I hold on it, there's a little letter right there. So that tells me that that is the hotkey. So I could hit V for Move Tool, or I could hit W for Object Select, or I could hit Shift W to move between those different options. I want the one that looks like a little brush. With the little brush active, I want to start with what should be the laziest option, which would be to hit Select Subject. Also notice that down at the bottom, before I did that, my contextual taskbar actually had that. I want us to look at the Quick Select tool, so that's why I brought it up. This is also where we can talk about where stuff has changed. So like right now, we can see his head is in my selection. So when I wrote this chapter back in, when I did the last version of this chapter back in August 2025, we can see that it didn't used to grab his head, which is why we went to the Quick Select tool rather than just starting with the contextual taskbar. So we would use the Quick Select tool to add the head back into the selections. Like stuff is changing, and it's changing for the better. Like this is good. Good for you. For me, trying to teach this course or this textbook, it's a huge headache. But like normally this is where we would have like the head would be missing from the selection. We'd click right here, add to selection, and we would paint the head back into our selection. And we'll take a closer look at these tools in chapter 2. So I'm not super sad that this is gone. But like this is what used to be here. Now, right now, what I've done is by making the selection, I've told Photoshop that I want to work with just part of the image. Like you don't have to, but I'm going to grab the brush tool and I'm going to draw on here. And notice how I can't draw outside of that selection, which is marked by these marching ants. So I have inside the selection and outside of the selection. Anything selected, I can change, and anything not selected, I can't. Now I can convert a selection into something called a layer mask, which shows or hides the layer that it's attached to. To do that, in my contextual taskbar, I'll click the box with the circle, or down over here in Layers panel, I'll click that same box. And we can see that there is now a grid pattern behind the figure telling me that it's transparent, and there's now a black and white image over here in my Layers panel. We'll look much more in depth at this in chapter 2 and in later chapters, but the short version is white shows, black reveals. It's like a way to think about this is that like if I was an old school photographer, where's my graphic? There it is. If I was an old school photographer, I would have an enlarger. And in that enlarger, I'd have a negative or a positive image that would cast down onto the photosensitive paper that would allow me to generate my actual photograph. Now, if I wanted to swap out the sky, so let's say I wanted the ground from this one and the sky from this one, I would mask off the sky here, and then I would take the inverse of that mask, and I would hide my paper down here, allowing my sky then to hit, creating this composite image. Now in Photoshop, it's even easier than that. It's like I have my sky down here, and then I have my foreground, and I've just masked out the sky image of that foreground image, creating this nice little composite. So a lot of things in Photoshop actually comes from old school versions, how we would do this in the darkroom or graphic design. And this is old, by the way. So like this is a excellent image right here made up of a pile of different images put together back from 1858 using that exact concept. And we can see that the guys cut out multiple images and has masked them together to create this kind of fading away composite. This girl is supposed to be dying of tuberculosis. That's what's going on here. Anyway. Whoop. And layer masks are going to be important. Like we're going to be using a lot of these moving forward. Now we have our figure and we've removed his background. So now we need to add in a new background. To do that, we're going to come up to File. We're going to go to Placed Embedded. Again, next chapter, we're going to look at other ways of putting stuff together. For us today, this will be the one that we want to do. I'm going to grab chapter 1, Cole Thomas, Destruction of Empire. This is from a painting series he did about what's supposed to be the course of empire, and this is the destruction phase. I don't really buy into the philosophy of it, but the paintings are pretty rad. Now, when we've added it in, we can see we've got this blue X going through it. This tells me that this is in place mode. Place mode makes it really easy for me to do certain types of transformations. So in this case, let's zoom out a little bit to make this easier. So I'm going to hold down Control or Command and hit minus to zoom out slightly. And then I'm going to mouse over this little box and I'm going to drag up. Notice I'm getting a pink line across the center, and now I've got a pink line across the top as well. This is called snapping. You can think of it as like a magnet guide system that will kind of put stuff where Photoshop thinks you want it to go. And honestly, it's really handy. I love it. Sometimes you do want to turn it off. So you go up to View and turn it off here. Same thing if yours is not snapping, you would just turn that on to bring snap back. I'm going to mouse over the bottom control point and drag down until it snaps to the bottom, and I've got my thing in place. Now to exit place mode, I can click the check mark. I can click Done. I can double click, or I can hit Return on my keyboard to say I'm done. You have to do that step because otherwise you won't be able to interact with the rest of the image because it's just focused on that place. Now we have one of the other key concepts in Photoshop being demonstrated, which is where did our figure go? So Photoshop, you can kind of think of this as like the old school, old school, like Scooby-Doo cartoons. Like if we open up, where is my demo? Not you. There it is. So if we look at this, we can think of this as like the old school Scooby-Doo cartoons. Like I've got my table right here on which I'll be photographing. It's like that white space right there would be where the actual like image would be. And I've got my background right here, which we can think of this as like that background that you would see sliding back and forth in the old Scooby-Doo cartoons. Like that's why they would repeat it, because like it would get to here and then it would be set up, they could bring it over and it would just loop continuously, saving them money and time. And then for Shag and Scoob, they would be painted on a clear piece of plastic like this right here in order to make it look like they were moving. So like let's say they're center of the screen, the background would just shift back and forth, making it look like they were walking. To create a parallax effect, so like if they wanted to make it look like they were moving slightly, they would have like the sun, they'd move it slightly, this would move a little bit more and so on. And that would create the illusion of like parallax depth. So they're walking along, the background moves, they get up to a door, the door is slightly discolored, and that's because it's also painted on a clear piece of plastic, because rather than trying to animate that in the background, they just animate the door, making it nice and easy. And let's say they walk outside and they need it to tint a color. So they would add in let's say they throw like a piece of clear blue plastic over it rather than repainting everything a new color or mixing new colors. They can just tint it with plastic. Now, just like in that Shag and Scooby-Doo cartoon, the layer order matters. Like if the sun is above everything in my layer stack over here, it's above everything in my image. So we can think of these layers like old Scooby-Doo cartoons. I have my background, then I have my clear pieces of plastic with my figures on it, and then sometimes I'll have something like an adjustment layer that will change the appearance of everything underneath it, like a blue layer or something like that, to make it quicker and easier for them to make those kind of special effects. So when you're thinking of layers, think animation, think Scooby and Shag. So in this case, we can see my Shag and Scooby background by repeating the little horrible loop is above my figure. And so I just need to change that layer order. So I'm going to click and drag on this layer and drag down. Now, when you're doing this, what you don't want to do is you don't want to click and drag up on that mask, because then this happens. And you don't want to click and drag on the mask. You want to click and drag on either the figure or the open space next to it or on the image here. Also be careful to not turn this chain link off. We want to leave that on. And we can also temporarily hide and display our images by poking it in the eyeball. Now, in our case, we're not going to, shift this background moving across to try to like create an animation. We want to show more of that background. So to do that, we're going to use the crop tool. And normally you think of cropping as like chopping stuff off to make something smaller. But since we added this image, we have additional image here that we can reveal, and we will do that with the crop tool. So hit C on your keyboard for the crop tool, or come over here and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tools down and grab the crop tool. And it has these nice little control points on it to make it easy for us to crop. Now, it's not going to automatically snap to that edge. We could make it do that by making a selection, but that'll be in chapter 2. For us, we're going to drag it to be just within that edge, so we have a nice attractive image. And I'm going to drag just within this edge to have a nice attractive image. What I don't want to do is drag past, because then I have this nasty little white space and it doesn't look very professional or very good. So I'll drag just within inside that edge. And just like within the place mode, I would click the check mark. I could double click. I can click done, or I could hit enter. Whatever you want to get that into place. Next, our design calls for having our figure over to the left. So how do we move stuff? Move tool. And moving is common enough that it is the very first tool up here in the top left. It's also one where it's worth learning the hotkey. V for victory is the move tool. Now, as long as you have auto select up here turned on, you can click on what you want to move, and that will automatically move it. If I have this off, it's whatever layer I have active will move. So notice like I'm clicking on the figure, but the background's moving and this layer is highlighted. So I want to make sure auto select is turned on for now, and that allows me to move whatever I am clicking on. Also notice that while I'm moving it, I'm getting those handy pink lines. So we want those here in a second. So I'm going to click and drag over. I've got 3 pink lines. I've got top, center, middle. And I'm going to drag over until I see a line appear on the far left. And what we're doing here is we're practicing some basic good design stuff. So like this isn't bad. But like we bring him over, he's now well framed by the shape of this mountain and clouds, which creates a nice kind of dynamic effect. His own shape right here is mimicking the statue, which is also very good. And then we have this kind of implied interaction where this Vandal Goth is chasing this lady and it looks like she's about to run into his belly. It's kind of vaguely visually humorous. And as much as possible, we want to kind of try to do those sort of things. Now, the reason why we have him placed about like so is because if he gets too close to the edge, it looks bad. It's like, here, let me turn off snap so I can really show you. There's snap. There it is. It's like if I bring this right up to that edge, this is generally a no-no in design. So try to avoid that sort of thing. And in this case, it also doesn't look very good to have him run off the edge because I don't want him to feel like I want him to feel like he's on top of the frame. So I'm keeping this from running off. So again, try to place him in a way that we're placing him in a way that kind of accentuates our goals, which is kind of a humorous meme image that also frames itself within the space. While we're here, let's go ahead and label our layers as well. So we can see that this one's labeled layer 0. So I'm going to double click on layer 0 and type in yawning. And where it says chapter 1 call, I'm going to double click and type in background. When you're working in Photoshop, you will want to keep your layers well labeled. Tell yourself what they are for. So like if you have to open this file again in 5, 10, or 15 years or whatever as a working professional, you've done future self a massive favor by labeling these, because you can tell what the layers are and what they're supposed to do. So like we're going to have 3 layers in this chapter, not hard. Later chapters, we're going to have like 40. If they're not labeled, it's going to be really hard to do that chapter. So I would get in the habit of labeling these. Similarly, if you work as any part of a team using these programs and you send files off to your boss or coworkers that have unlabeled layers, you're going to get written up and eventually you'll get fired. Because like other people will need to be able to look at your layers and very quickly understand what they're looking at, how to set stuff up. And if stuff isn't labeled well, they're not going to be able to quickly interpret your files. It's going to slow production down and you're going to get in trouble. And if you keep at it, you'll get fired. So get in good practice for it now. Label your layers descriptively. So like I should probably actually, like if I was doing this, hero image, if I was being fastidious, but yawning is fun. So I think kind of yawning works here. All right, next we want to use the text tool, which is the giant T over here in my toolbar. I could also hit T for text tool on my keyboard to bring it up. Now, many tools in Photoshop will do something different versus if you click and drag. For the text tool, we want to click and not click and drag. So if you're doing this on a trackpad, it can be a little easy to mess this up. If I click, I get this nice lorem ipsum. If I click and drag, I get this lorem ipsum fill space. We want to just click. So we have normal lorem ipsum. And the difference here is like I can very quickly and easily transform and modify this all day. Versus like if I do the same thing with like a space right here, and I come through and I start trying to transform it. You come here. It doesn't quite work in the way that I'm expecting it to. So like I want to use the one where I'm not creating a filled space. I want to do one where I've got a single box. So click, not click and drag. So I've got the wrong T. There we go. So click, we get our lorem ipsum. I'm going to change this to O, Monday again. That's not came up. So I've got capital O, capital M, Monday again. Now I want to change the appearance of this. So yours is actually probably defaulting to black rather than white. But to change its color and appearance, I'm going to click on a bunch of these T for text tool to select it. This is the same thing as like selecting something in Microsoft Word. We can see that I already have the font that I want, but not the right font size. So either up here in my tool option bar or my contextual taskbar, or honestly over here in properties too, I'm going to start by clicking where it says probably Myriad or Minion for you. And I can click the drop down and navigate to Arial Black, or I could be fast and lazy and just start typing in Arial. Oh, there it is, Arial Black. And I can just click on it to grab the font that I want, which in this case, it's Arial Black. For the most part, we're going to be using pretty simple fonts until we get to installing fancy fonts later on. And it's just because everyone's computer has them. And honestly, they're not bad fonts. Next, where it says whatever number happens to be here, I'm going to type in 300 and hit enter. And that'll set it to 300 point size. And then if yours isn't white, you'll want to click this box. It might be black for you. So it would look like this right now. You would click this box and you'll drag to the top left to get white, which is 00100. So you know you got the right one. And you click OK. Finally, I need to click onto a different tool, or I need to click the checkmark box to say I'm done with the text tool. Then I can hit V for the move tool, or I can click on it and I can drag my text up to here to make it a little bit easier to read. Oops. I'm just hit Command Z or Control Z to undo that little background check. If you accidentally do something, just Control Z, Command Z works. Okay, so we have our meme. So we want to save it in a format that allows us to come back and change these, which would make it a non-destructive edit. So we're going to save it in our archive format of a Photoshop document or a .psd. To do that, I'm going to come up to File, and I'm going to go to Save. You'll get a warning saying I cannot save a JPEG without losing information. That's because my layers over here do not play well with JPEG. More on that later. So I'll click OK. And it'll give me the option to save it as a PSD. Now, if you're on an Apple computer, yours might look like this. You simply have to click this little drop down right here to expand this out. Windows, it'll be pretty similar. The key thing right here is that there'll be an area that says Format, and it needs to say Photoshop. And this will allow us to at any point come back and modify the changes we've made. That's the goal of our Photoshop file, is the changes we've made are undoable. It's non-destructive editing. I'm going to throw this on my desktop so it's easy for me to delete. And now I want to give it a descriptive file name. So to the left of the .psd, I'm going to delete out DeCroy yawning, and I'm going to type in done. And I want descriptive file names like this. So I've got chapter1-done works really well. If I was doing like art, I would probably do something like, what's today's date? The 16th. So I would do 2026. 0816 underscore, and then I would describe this yawning destruction meme. But for us, chapter1 also works really well. But you want to give yourself a descriptive file name, just like with the descriptive layer names. It does everyone a favor, and to your bosses or coworkers, if that's where you end up using Photoshop, it's also pretty key. Those places will have their own file naming requirements, but that's what we're doing right now. That said, putting in the date is never a bad idea at the start because it makes it pretty easy to sort stuff, or some sort of other thing at the start that makes it easy to sort your files. Then you will click save. You'll get this for compatibility thing. We don't care. Click don't show again, and you'll click OK to save your PSD file. And that's it. Not too bad. Like, this is pretty easy to do.